Welcome everybody. It is IKYA Live from IKYA Center here in Oslo, Norway. We're so happy to have you with us. Please, down below, like the live stream tonight. Subscribe to ikya.official on IKYA on YouTube, and share the link for tonight's live on all your social media. And if you want to, and if you want to join in on the Zoom to be able to ask questions and interact directly with us tonight, go ahead and do that. The link is in the description for tonight down below. So you can make comments on tonight's live stream, but if you want to ask questions, please sign up for the Zoom link below and then join into the Zoom meeting. Welcome everybody on Zoom. We look forward to your questions tonight, and we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our official launch out into the world. We're super excited. We had a soft launch last week that went well, and tonight's topic, I want to thank actually one of our YouTube subscribers, Mirna Vanderbols 2226. Who wrote in a bunch of really nice comments, but also then a really interesting question, wondering if we could talk about veganism, ecology, and all around that. And IKYA and I were discussing that vegan January has become a thing as part of New Year's resolutions and diet fads during January. And it seemed like before we leave January in 2 days from now, let's talk about veganism, vegetarianism, diets, food, and the connection to consciousness. And to get us started, I'm going to throw it right over to IKYA with a really good question of why do people dislike vegans so much? The context for that is that often vegans can be a bit I don't know, militant in their views. It can be a little in your face, reminding us every time they're going to eat with you that they only eat this, that, or the other thing. So to get us started, I'm going to kick it over to IKYA. IKYA, why do people so often dislike vegans?
Wait.
I think it's not just vegans. I think it's anyone who try to come across as having the only truth. And to me, it's like whenever we as humans find a new belief system, find a new practice, find something that we see as the big truth, we have the tendency to become quite extreme. And the mechanism behind it is that once we adopt a new way of thinking, we need to distance ourselves kind of from the old version of us, right? So then we have to prove that we're all in, right? And that's also why, this is often why we then become so extreme. So the most religious people, are the newly converted, right? No matter what it is, but it's in human nature that we then just want to prove that we are the right stuff, and we get so convinced, right? Because when we feel we found something new, it takes up all the bandwidth. It becomes the most important thing ever. But at some point we move on, right? So I think, because veganism is also a belief system and a religion, in many ways, I think it's fine. But, just like when you are newly converted, often we become quite judgmental when it comes to other people's choices. I think that's also what people don't like, right? Because they feel judged by being normal. And I think it's important that we don't have to do that. There are so many different ways of living and walking our paths. And, the interesting thing is, as many of you know, when you go deeper into spiritual practices, we connect more to what's unique about us. We connect more to our karma and what we're here to do. And we become more sensitive to energies and information. because we start to listen and our bodies will become part of a spiritual process. And then often we will have to change with it, right? So the normal thing is to try different diets and approaches, and they only work for a while because then you've been in a certain space, you've been addressing something particular in yourself and your process, and then you move on. Nothing lasts very long. And this is also kind of the fun thing about spiritual work is that we learn to be quite flexible because when we hold on to something, at some point it will block us. And also when it comes to our health, I've met so many people over the years who've found like the best diet, the best whatever it is. And after a while, it doesn't work anymore because they have changed. So remember that when you connect to your flow, right, and more of your flow is coming through and you connect more to life and the changes of life, you can't sit with any kind of system, any way of thinking permanently because you're changing, you're adapting, you're growing. And you learn that whatever I hold on to, whatever I think, whatever I believe, it will change. So over time, you learn to not really care. You stop believing because, whatever I believe, at some point of figuring out it's not working anyway. So why be so extreme about it? So we learn to relax and we learn to move through different stages. But it's also something to be said. In a way, I like people being extreme too. There is something about it that I find entertaining. Because, if you think of your own path as being a series of kind of points of evolution, when you are in one point of evolution, you experience that because that's basically your life. You're in one point and then everything is rendered, and then you have to interact with it to learn, and then you can move on. Really trying to explore that position, right? And with that position come, of course, like the experience you've had so far, your track record, everything you've gone through, which means that you will come to certain conclusions based on that journey that are different from other people. But when you stand at that point, you're supposed to explore it. You're supposed to go all in and own it and really be that exact point of evolution until you are suddenly not that point of evolution anymore because you have moved on, right? But you can still explore it in a fun and really be so insistent that I found the only truth. Because in a way, you're supposed to believe that as a human, right? If you didn't take it too seriously, most people wouldn't learn anything. So going into all the conflicts or whatever, it's just part of humans exploring their exact points of evolution. But what we also then need to understand is that we're all on different journeys. Right? We're all in different points of evolution, which means what works for you. And the conclusions and definitions that you have arrived at might not be relevant to anyone else because they have different experiences. They have different journeys. They've been exposed to different information than you have. And their mind works differently, the different value system, which means that we arrive in very different stories, versions, and perspectives. And to me, that is wonderful. We need to learn to accept that there is no such thing as one perspective that is true. I often, see it more as, in a way, dots on a painting. If you have a huge painting and different dots, having a discussion like which dot is the right one, which dot is the true one, which one represents truth, right? When reality is you need all of them because that is the painting. And this is how life works. In our journeys, we go through absolutely every single position, every single belief, every single definition and variation, and we believe all of it until we move on. So standing in different positions, it's necessary. And I think also the fact that we are in different journeys and arrive at different conclusions and we operate in different levels of consciousness, that is wonderful. It also gives us the opportunity to learn from other people and their experiences and their journeys, and also look at how do they arrive at this, right? And I think we need to learn also in the spiritual world of, spiritual workers and travelers and all that, to truly celebrate every single position, every single kind of definition and belief and practice, because they just represent different dots on the painting. And if there was only one dot, it wouldn't be much of a painting, right? It wouldn't be interesting. So we need all of these variations to explore. This is also why I think over time, my experience is that we grow out of being judgmental. We stop judging because we see the infinite value in whatever represents something else than us, because we already know that. That's part of our journey already. It's the learning potential lies everywhere else than our current positions. And so it is with, if you're vegan or not vegan or all of that. It's just different positions, different ways to explore ourselves and our bodies. And, also when it comes to spiritual work, as I said, because your body changes, stuff you used to be able to deal with, you can't. People experience all sorts of weird sensitivities, and all of a sudden they can't deal with that because their bodies are changing faster. And it also happens kind of to move in the opposite direction as well, which I think is really fun. You can go from being hypersensitive and not being able to eat anything, and all of a sudden you eat at McDonald's every day, if you want to. Because your body is energy and it's changing constantly. So, I think it's as I said, like learning to deal with food as energy and information is really important in spiritual work. Because when we think of it, like why we define it as food is a story, and often we eat for emotional reasons, mental reasons, cultural reasons, all of that, which is part of the journey. But when we go a little further, it's basically energy and information, and so is everything else. And the interesting thing about this is that every single manifestation, no matter what it is, when it comes into being, it simply represents energy and information in different varieties. And when you touch an object, the information that you are becomes part of that object. All exchanges are permanent. And this is also how the universes expand, is because we all touch each other in different ways. So when you start listening to and relating to energy and information in what you eat, when you look at a food item, like everything it's going through becomes part of what you're eating. It's not just the matter, it's not just the nutrients, it's all of the other stuff. So, every person who was involved in the production, the belief systems and intentions and the machines and like all of that also adds to the information and energy in that particular food item. And even, if you have different people putting them into the shelves, that will also change the energy. So in theory, not just in theory, I've seen this many times, you can go to a supermarket, you can have two identical products, two items, right, of the same brand, but they vibrate differently because those two manifestations have gone through different journeys and how to get to that exact place. So when you start listening to your own kind of dialogue with life, you start noticing slight differences in energy and information, and you start relating to that. And you don't just eat nutrients anymore. You eat the information, you eat the energy, you eat the intention, you eat the co-creation, because it's an active part of what you're experiencing, and it will affect your health. So, and it's also like learning to understand what we actually need in any given moment. At when you start discovering diets in general, I think it's fun to explore because it's also, it's for you to take charge in your own health and to experiment and to figure out, oh, there are ways to impact my health, right? Um, and the fun thing is that many people experience enormous health benefits from shifting to a vegan diet. A lot of people experience great health benefit from like when they go to an all meat diet. There are diets where people only eat meat, salt, and drink water. And many experience great health benefits. So it is with, I don't know, macrobiotic diets. You can have paleo diet. You can have so many different diets, but often they all work. And the reason is like when you start something new, you will become more aware. And your awareness shifts your energy. And in addition, once you shift your diet, your body will get a jolt because it's not what it's used to. And as we know, whenever we change something, the body will become more aware of itself. And it will then try to figure out what's really going on and how can I make this work. So often in that early kind of stage of a diet, you'll get great health benefits because your body is adjusting and figuring out how to do this, which means that the awareness on cellular level will increase. At some point that will pass. And then often people find that, yeah, it's back to normal. So it means all diets can work. Yes, Andy?
So IKYA, then that indicates, like, we talk a lot about that New Year's resolutions are kind of like silly or stupid because nobody holds them for more than a couple weeks or a couple days or something. But based on the mechanism you're talking about, it sounds like actually it would be really beneficial to try a New Year's resolution every year just for the sake of introducing a change that your sort of mind and body can respond to and see what happens. Even whether you hold it or you don't, it could be interesting to, is there something to that?
Well, I think it depends how you do it, right? Because if we have that thing, oh, I'm going to eat more healthy, and then you don't, that's not really trying anything. But if you add something positive to your life and you test it out, I think that can be beneficial, even though you may end up not doing it. It's still testing. As we all know, the human mind is very slow. Uh, we have a tendency to stick to our programmings. So, yes, like anything and everything we can do, testing out new strategies, I think is healthy. And it doesn't mean that we always have to stay with them. But trying new things, I think, is a way for us to practice more flexibility. Um, but you're right, most people, when they try things, they go back to their old ways. And I think it's important that we don't judge ourselves for that. We do what is natural to our patterns. And when it comes to what we eat, because it's so emotional to most people, it is part of those subconscious programs, right? And people use food today as self-medication. And there is nothing wrong with that as long as you operate on that level. Um, so,
Just can I
learning.
cut in real
Yeah.
quick? Sorry, because another aspect of this question of veganism and during like vegan January is that the question of ecology and carbon footprint and
Hmm.
all of that. And we had discussed a little bit that idea of not eating animals, for example,
Yeah.
um, is that really ethical? Is that really like, it's such an interesting question because clearly there's some science behind carbon footprint and those kinds of things. But can you talk a little bit about the sort of like consciousness food connection,
Hmm.
but to ecology and the
Yeah.
planet and climate change?
Okay. I will answer this in two ways. Like first with the question, if it's wrong to eat animals, I would say it's only wrong if you believe that to be true. Because then that position represents your active like state of consciousness, right? As I said, we have to explore where we are at. And if you have arrived at a conclusion where you see it as wrong to eat animals, well, then you shouldn't. But then it's up to you to live by your own insights and your own conclusions and let other people be. Because basically, when we look at all positions, as I said, they're just steps of the way. We will always operate in a very subjective consciousness. And we need to let other people be and to let them do whatever is right for them. So I think it's, with all ways of thinking, all beliefs, there's infinite room for that as long as we are the ones practicing. And we let other people practice what they feel is right for them. So as our consciousness changes and grows, we always move into bigger pictures and we understand things differently. And we move away from right or wrong, and we just basically see everything happening as one organic expression of consciousness in learning. And we know that we have to go through absolutely everything. For instance, when it comes to the different ways of thinking around food, one point that is really important when it comes to spiritual work is that everything is energy and information, right? But behind there, you can also see this in physics, it becomes one thing. When you go behind atoms, when you go behind particles, when you go behind the smallest fractions, it becomes one thing. It's this enormous life flow. You can call that oneness, you can call it love, in manifested form. But it means that as we grow spiritually, we start to connect with the love behind everything. We start to connect with the oneness, and we start seeing how everything in life is the same, that it comes from the same source. There are just different ways of expressing it, but the deeper we go, the more we'll recognize that oneness. And as we do, we start seeing it concretely in the world. We start experiencing it that way. And you get to a point also when you work with diet and try to figure yourself out, at some point that will switch. Because when you realize that, oh, right, I'm eating light. I'm eating love. I'm actually eating oneness. Because behind these atoms, no matter what it is, it's just a form. But behind it, there is the great oneness. And that is what it truly is. But you can only see it if you vibrate that yourself, right? When you are in that mindset, when you're in that consciousness, and you relate to everything as the one. That also happens when you eat. So then, if you eat this or that, it starts to become the same thing. And you see it as a way to be in an exchange of love. And you have active experiences of the oneness level also in food. I've talked to many spiritual students and travelers over the years who've been very disciplined with their diets, and they've really been using food as a spiritual practice. And at some point, this begins to happen, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. Because they start recognizing that it's all love. It was my own belief systems and judgment saying that this is right, this is wrong, this is dangerous, this is high quality, this is, that became what I saw, and therefore it affected my health that way. when I'm able to relate to this as love, as oneness, and I'm also in that state, I'm eating the divine light. And it will heal me no matter what it is. And to me, this is, as a kind of spiritual traveler, I think this is where we all not end up, but this is where we're going. No matter what it is recognizing that it's just a form. And I'm then projecting my own beliefs onto that form, and that is what I'm interacting with. If I'm able to go beyond that, it's all of the same oneness. Mm-hmm.
So actually, we got a really interesting question connected to that because
Mm-hmm.
Linette here in Norway mentioned that it's in the news that Norway and the EU are in discussions about increasing the amount of insect protein in the in the food stream, but that people's resistance to that form of protein indicates that we may need to actually put it into food without labeling it as insects. And
Yes, I'm sure they'll find some fancy names,
right.
right?
So anyway, but what Linette was leading to is, could you then speak? You're talking about kind of where we go in our spiritual path. Where do you see the future of food going here on planet Earth?
I think, because technology moving forward so quickly, and we will need to produce food in different ways, because as we know, food production is also ruining the planet. Humans are not able to do anything unless it ruins something. Right? It's just that's where we are, at least at this point. So, food will be produced in different ways and in more contained ways. Vertical farming will become a big thing. Over time, printing food will also become a big thing. So the whole kind of food industry will change, I think, drastically. And remember, over time, it will be all taken over by AI and robots anyway, because when you have your complete body analyzed any given second, it means and when AI and robots are making your meals, you can then get the nutrients you need through that meal, because the meal will be based on the analysis of your body. That's where we're moving. And when also we get to a point where anything can taste anything, because that will happen too, you can basically get whatever you want, but it will still contain the nutrients you need. It opens up for creativity and playfulness around food in ways that are not possible yet. And also with printing food and using, again, AI and robots, we can also achieve kind of new textures and forms and types of meals and everything that we simply cannot do today. So that will be fun. So kind of growing food in nature, I think, will have its place for quite a while. But I think industrial production will change over the next few generations. But back to this point about insects and all that, yes, the thought that people have around eating insects, at least in most parts of the world that are not used to it, it kind of blocks it. And it's interesting because, as we know, there are so many nutritious insects and they're so easy to grow, and the footprint is extremely low compared to any other kind of food source. So obviously we'll have to learn to include more insects. And again, it's part of the food industry also growing and expanding, and we get foods from all over the world. Remember that in most parts of the world, insects in different variations are already part of the diet, right? It's just in our part of the world that we're not used to it. But we've learned to adapt to all other trends, so I'm sure that we'll get used to that too.
So I think it might be good to just ask you the question directly that we put out tonight. Should we all be vegan?
again, if you want to, that's the thing. We should do whatever we want to and whatever we feel is right for us, because when we're drawn to something, right, it simply means that whatever it is represents part of that exact point of evolution that we find ourselves in. But we have to figure out what that is to ourselves, because again, all our paths are so unique, and what we need is very unique. So what we learn over time is to, listen more to the energy. We learn to listen more to the information in the food, and we care less about what it actually is. And it's a fun way of dealing with diet, because it's basically recognizing, like, where am I at in my energy today, and even like what thoughts am I having, like what is going on, and then listening to how is that being reflected, what is it that I need in order to balance myself, in order to promote healing, and I think the intention behind what we eat is so important too, because I've talked about this a lot, but often why people don't succeed when they go on a typical diet to lose weight, for instance, is that the intention is self-hatred. They don't necessarily do it out of love, but that they hate themselves and they don't like what they see in the mirror and they're never good enough and all of that. And then the diet becomes the vehicle for that negative energy. And that complex of negative thoughts and emotions, and that's what you're eating, because the matter simply becomes an extension of the energy. So you're eating yourself into misery. And when you eat your diet salad, you just feel terrible, not because the salad is terrible, but because you've already decided that this is an expression of my self-hatred. And so very healthy food can then bring you down. It can bring you great unhealth, because stress and self-negativity is the one most important health factor. Stress is also a form of negativity, and one knows that it has an enormous effect on the body. So the intention behind what you eat and how you're kind of nurturing yourself, if you love yourself, if you love your life, if you want to take care of yourself, if you want to celebrate the fact that you are alive and you want good things for yourself, that changes how your body responds to whatever you're eating. Because again, if you want to be healthy because you're a terrible person and nobody likes you and all that, you will not get better health. This is also why, for instance, whether it's being vegan or whether it's anything else, if it comes from hatred, if it comes from judgment, if it comes from that kind of extreme way of thinking and feeling, it's not healthy, because it's not love. It doesn't support, it doesn't nurture. To me, if something is loving and caring, it affects people around you in a positive way. Because if you fill yourself with more love, that will spill over. And often when we do things out of judgment, self-negativity, it does not have that effect on other people. People feel repulsed, because nobody likes a black hole. Because that's basically what we become when we're full of self-negativity. Other people can feel it, that they get drained. And I think no matter what political views we have or practices, food, spiritual, whatever it is, that if people have that reaction to us, I think we should examine, like, what is the purpose of my practices? Because if my presence is not uplifting other people, if they don't feel nurtured by my presence, there's no spillover. I've not increased my level of love. And then I haven't really increased my, level of health. Because ultimately, true health, deep health, is a state of healing. It's not a matter of doing the right things, but promoting healing in yourself and other people. So back to the intention. It's always important to examine what is my intention behind this. And, you know, eating delicious foods can also be self-punishment, right? I'm a fat pig, so I should just stuff myself, right? And I like these foods, but still, you know, it becomes a compulsion. And you can eat the same things and celebrate and feel good about yourself because you love life and you love good food, you know. So it comes back to matter in itself is not where the information is. You have to look at the intention, and especially when you do things to yourself, we should be extremely concerned and aware of our own intentions because that become what we eat. So wanting to love yourself, wanting to nurture yourself, wanting to uplift yourself and pull yourself up, and practice to move out of self-negativity, and then eating from that intention and trying our best just to see, like, how do I eat that? Because sometimes giving yourself love, yeah, it can be McDonald's. It can also be super healthy food. It can be, you know, going on a fast. It can be anything. But when you are in that state, what are you drawn to? Because that will then be the expression. And this is what we'll learn over time, right? We'll learn to connect to our true intentions as high up as possible. And we listen to our higher self, and like, how can I balance myself and grow today? And then you will feel that you're drawn to certain things. And you will learn to recognize that, oh, right, that is that energy. I could feel, okay, that's going on inside of me. So yes, exactly. It takes time to learn, but over time, when we play around with this, we start getting it. And we understand that we can then relate to anything, do anything, eat anything. But the intention, if that is healing, then what we choose is what will bring us closer to the healing path. It's not a belief system. It's not doing anything right or wrong. It's not political. It's not being better than. It's not punishing yourself. It's simply recognizing, how can I become more of what I am? How can I allow for more of my essence and my consciousness to unfold? How can I be true to what I am and to go beyond my patterns and my behaviors, and then also have a more positive impact on life around me? So to me, this is a much better way to deal with the whole complex of food and diets and not be stuck in any kind of particular kind of ism.
So that reminds me, actually, a little anecdote, when I was in university and met my roommate, who would be my roommate for all 4 years. He nicknamed me the environmental Nazi because I was proselytizing, you know, recycling and all these different things. And, you know, as one does, I kind of mellowed out in those 4 years. And what was interesting is, by the end of the 4 years, we lived together the whole time, he started finally recycling and doing some of those things after 4 years. And when I talked with him about it, he said, you know, you shut up, and I didn't want to listen to you anyway, but he told me I was more quiet over the years, but he watched me and I lived what I was talking about. And I think it says something to what you're saying, because there can be such, people can get so dogmatic about their diets or their New Year's resolutions, and yet it's when we walk the talk, it's when we practice what we're, you know, what we say we're working on. And that's what, in the end, after 4 years, inspired him to try out some of the things that I had told him, you know, or yelled at him at the start. He watched me live it. And I think, yeah, I'm kind of curious, though, personally, why do we why do we insist on sort of proselytizing and pushing what we're testing in ourselves on others?
Oh, that is very simple to answer. It's like when we are not true to our own beliefs for real, then we always have to convince others. It's just that every time. When we truly vibrate, when we are in harmony with what we believe, no matter what it is, and when we are living that fully, we couldn't care less what other people are doing because we are in harmony. But when we're in conflict because we feel that we have to force ourselves, right? It's not internalized, so we have to force ourselves and we have to deny ourselves things, then it's really important that nobody else should get away, right? It's for instance, if you have a religious belief, and that religious belief means that you have a lot of restrictions, and you feel that you look at all these people around you, and you have to live with all these restrictions, and look at all these people who are seemingly happy, right? And they don't get any consequences for their terrible actions, and they seem to be happy, and nothing is happening to them. And here you are doing the right thing, and you're basically trying to discipline yourself, and you're restricting yourself, you're denying yourself everything good in life to serve God, and they get away with it. You will feel a strong urge to tell them, right? And to punish them for their ways, because you are punishing yourself by doing all these things and you really don't want to. So like they are sure as hell not going to get away with it, right? It's that. So it's still when we are not in harmony with our beliefs and our practices, we always, always want to convince other people. We always push, right? Because they are getting away with it and you are not. And that means as long as you are in conflict, you have not internalized it. It's not natural to you and you're struggling. This is what I mean. Like when we have a spiritual practice over time and it becomes natural, we go past the ego, we go past the programmings, and we start connecting and we move into a state of alignment, and there's flow. We just recognize that, all right, this belongs to me. This is my process. This is my karma. This is my journey. And other people have to find harmony in their own way. And you recognize that whatever they do, that's their journey. And you also then recognize in a state of harmony that they will find it at some point. You can't force someone to be in harmony. It's a growth process. And they have to go through whatever they have to go through to figure it out and to heal. And what works for me does not necessarily work for them. But you only arrive at these conclusions in that active mindset when you are practicing and when you internalize and when you heal. So to me, again, anyone who tries to push anyone into doing anything, it means that, yeah, you're still in conflict. You're not doing it for real. You're just being pretentious. And then you want to pose because you know that you're faking it. You're not all in. So you're posing and you're faking and you want to convince other people that, look at me, I'm good enough. And again, because you feel that you're being punished, you so want to punish everybody else. So we also need to be compassionate when people behave that way, because it simply means that they're struggling. They're really trying their best. Maybe their belief systems do not make sense to them, but they're really trying because it's what they have arrived at. This has to be true. This has to be right. But they're not able to make it work. And there is so much blockage and resistance and whatever it is, and they're struggling. So try to be compassionate when you see someone like pushing their thing, and just realize, oh, right, they're not in harmony with what they're trying to achieve. It's just that.
So, IKYA, we're on the 30th day of the month, and my guess is that already 5 times in the news, it has flipped back and forth between butter being healthy for me or going to kill me tomorrow. Linetta highlighted canola or rapeseed oil as being highlighted as a really healthy oil and fat, because of course Norway makes a lot of it, so Norwegians want to believe that it's super healthy.
Right.
However, you've talked about canola oil being probably cancer causing as well. And as you're pointing out tonight, a lot of that is dependent on, one, your genetics and physiology, and two, your own level of consciousness and intention and stuff. But how might we more effectively or productively sort of deal with this collective discussion about what's healthy, what's not, and it's changing all the time?
Well, it's, as we have talked about today, the only solution is to recognize what is my path, what resonates with me, and to learn to listen through your body. Remember that you are a self-healing consciousness, a self-healing unit, which means your body is also self-healing. It doesn't mean that you can heal absolutely anything. There are limits, but your body will be drawn towards substances, and information and energy that will heal. We just need to learn to listen. And back to the point that what can heal us can change every day. And this is also what we'll learn on the spiritual journey, that a food that could heal us, yesterday can harm us today because we are in a different state. So there is no, like from a spiritual perspective, there is no kind of absolute saying this is healthy, this is unhealthy, because it's not how things work. On a lower level, when people are in the reactive state, more in the what we refer to as a horizontal, where they're part of the collective consciousness, the collective karmic process will kind of dominate, and then people will be much more similar, right? Because they're basically on the bus, right? Going in the same direction, taking part in the same journey, which means then they will respond very similarly to things. And I think, as we've also seen over the last decades, that foods we thought were healthy are classified as unhealthy and vice versa because they can't figure it out. And so it has to be, right? Also because people need to learn that you cannot trust outer authority. You need to take charge and control and experiment in your own body. And, so many people experience this, right? That they get an illness, something happens to their health, where they are forced to kind of reassess everything they thought they knew around food and diet, and they try out different things, and sometimes they figure out how to heal themselves, and it goes against absolutely everything they've been told. And that is healthy. It's discovering the uniqueness of the path and the uniqueness of healing. And it's unavoidable. This is what we all have to do at some point. So in a way, the public discussions simply reflect the collective consciousness at any given moment and what's going on in the world. And I think it's important, as a spiritual traveler, that we can be kind of in it, we can observe it, but sometimes we can see, I'm in a different kind of discussion. I'm in a different dialogue with life around this. So we can both accept that people who need this, they take part in that, and my healing process is different. Because most people are still asleep. They still just want to be unconscious. They want to eat unconscious food. They want to eat in such a way that their patterns take over even more. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's also a level of consciousness and a kind of state of development that people need to move through. And when they're ready to kind of make a departure from the collective consciousness, something will happen. And often it can be health related. There are so many, like, thousands and maybe millions of people today on the spiritual path who basically had their jolt, the first jolt of the conscious awakening, connected to their health. Right? Because when something happens to us with our bodies, we have to deal with it. And so health is a great tool in awakening. And I've seen, again, people with no interest for health or food or healing. They've been forced to. And they've had this inner voice kind of guiding them, just knowing that I have to deal with this, I have to figure things out. And they do. And gradually they connect to themselves, their flow and their path and their healing. And that's also what it's for. So, in a way, the collective exists, at the same time it doesn't. Because when it comes down to it, it's you and your path, right, and your dialogue. And you becoming more and more unique to who you are, and finding the unique tools and strategies. And nobody can tell you what to do. And to me, that's the great beauty of awakening, is that we are left to our own devices, but we're guided and encouraged. So normally working with our health is part of a kind of spiritual awakening and a spiritual path. But don't turn it into religion. Don't turn it into dogma and making it more important than it is, because it's just energy and information.
So we got a pretty fun question. Wondering if, are you authorized to talk about the sort of future unknown food sources that may not be on our radar yet, like the ones hidden under the ocean floor or anything like that?
No. The thing is, like, what's important to understand is that we never interfere. And then you say, what am I doing here then? Right? Because, when civilizations are developed and our presence is to assist in the unfoldment of consciousness and also of a life form, you can inject kind of information and tools and technology and all of that, but then you have to let the life form and consciousness do with it whatever it wants to. And humans have to go through their kind of discoveries and innovation and changes based on also what's happening in the world today. Because it's natural for a life form not actively wanting anything to change. So with whatever, everything going on in both when it comes to environment, economy, all of that, humans will have to reinvent quite a lot of things. But that's up to the collective consciousness. So still, what we do is, in a way, we keep our distance and we never interfere, we never intervene. And the balance is obviously like when you have a child and you want that child to become independent and strong, you have to find the balance between protecting that child from killing himself, several times a day by simply not understanding how to navigate in the world, but also give that the sense of autonomy and strength and letting that child injure himself just enough to learn and to build skills. And it's always about that balance. And Also understanding that if humans want to destroy themselves, they have the right to do so. If they want to destroy the planet, they can absolutely do that. We will not interfere. We will support. We will introduce. And we will be there. But as parents also know, you can't overprotect. So, yes, of course, there will be a lot of changes and innovations. And over time, everything will be better. It's just, it keeps getting better. Humans will have to figure things out. But when you look at human history, at least, the official version, you can still see that everything has gotten better. Everything, all the time, because that's part of the human journey. So being, a human 200 years from now will be so much fun, so much more creative in every possible way. And a lot of the kind of health issues and illnesses that humans are experiencing today will be gone because it will be it will be fixed through genetic engineering. So life will become better. We're just moving through this weird transition, right? Where the old civilization has to die and a new one will emerge. It's not a different, it's still the same, but it's understanding that the kind of industrial phase of human history, like everything connected to that, has to die because we have to figure out something better, and humans will. But also when it comes to food, if you think of how food and food culture, how much it has improved over the last 30, 40, 50 years, it will continue, right? It will just keep getting better. It's important, I think, to remind ourselves to not believe the negative stories. Because the human mind will create negative stories and fear around change. It's natural. I often talk about the kind of risk assessment thing of the human brain. Everything other than repeating what we're doing represents more risk. So when we are in a world right now where everything is changing and everything has to change, we create resistance stories in ourselves that it's dangerous. Just look at entertainment today is so dark. It's like, it seems like every other show is about the world has gone to hell and we're the last survivors. Like, it's just awful. It's the exact opposite that's happening, right? So we're trying to tell ourselves that this is where it ends. It's not ending, it's beginning. And it's so much better, so much more fun. So don't believe the negativity. Also, when it comes to food, like people are figuring it out. We're discovering, as a global culture, more and more ingredients because we have ingredients from all over the world. Food culture is just growing and growing, getting better and better and better, and that will not stop, ever. And I often use food culture as a reference to what's happening in all areas of life. Don't believe the negativity. And stop watching those shows, right? Because it gives you a false narrative. And the same thing with a lot of the news where it's so much fear. Yes, we have to go through change and everyone is resisting, and that's why we get all these stories. But in reality, it's transformation. And it will lead us on a much better path as a global culture and as a life form. We need to get this planet in order. We need to get to a state of harmony. But we can't do that collectively unless we do it individually, right? And that's the essence of also what we're talking about today. You have the responsibility to find harmony within yourself, to be in alignment with whatever it is that you believe, to be in alignment and harmony with your exact point of evolution, and to explore and to practice. Take responsibility for yourself, your choices, and how you can promote more healing in yourself so that you may be a vehicle of love and then be someone who can lift the planet. But your practices belong to you. You are the only one who should be practicing. You are the only one who should be living your beliefs, whatever they are. Let other people be, because that's how you lift the consciousness. But we cannot, again, bring harmony to the world until we, on an individual level, find harmony within ourselves. And then food and health is definitely a big part of it. But we have to do it in a way that promotes healing, not this, very strict, controlling way of thinking that only certain things are healthy or can bring health.
Okay. I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up for tonight. So, again, my name is Andy, Operations Manager here at IKYA Center, and you've been with us for IKYA Live. Thank you so much, IKYA, for talking with us tonight about diet and consciousness and the connection with food and energy. We really look forward to seeing all of you back with us next Monday, what would that be, the 6th of February, or 5th of February, sorry, at 7 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live. We'll have a brand new topic ripped from the day's headlines, and we'll take the spiritual perspective. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.